Good evening, my dear. I am the Buddha, and tonight you will fall asleep with me as I gently guide you toward rest. Before I share with you what I have come to share tonight, I want to acknowledge something that I think you may not have considered before. Something about the particular version of me that is speaking to you now. I am not the gilded statue. I am not the serene image on the altar. I am not the concept that has been translated and simplified and sometimes misunderstood across 25 centuries of human longing for clarity. I am Siddhartha Gautama, a man who was born, who lived in extraordinary privilege, who encountered suffering in a way that shattered his previous understanding of the world, who sat under a tree for a very long time and discovered something, not through divine revelation, but through the patient, rigorous, completely human act of paying attention. I was born in what is now southern Nepal, in the 5th century before the Common Era. My father was a king, or more precisely, a chief of the Shakya clan, and he raised me in a palace of extraordinary comfort, deliberately shielded from any encounter with old age, illness, or death. He had been told that I would either become a great king or a great spiritual teacher, and he very much preferred the former. So he built a world of perfect, pleasant surfaces and made sure I lived inside it. And for years, I believed in those surfaces. I married a beautiful woman named Yasodhara. I had a son named Rahula. I lived in pleasure and comfort and had no reason to question the adequacy of what surrounded me. Until, as you probably know, I ventured beyond the palace walls and encountered 3 things that my father had never allowed me to see: an old person, a sick person, and a corpse. And then a 4th thing, a wandering ascetic, a man who had renounced everything and who wore on his face an expression of quiet that I had never seen before on anyone inside the palace walls. I tell you all of this not because it is unfamiliar, the story is well known, but because I want you to understand something that is often lost in the translation of my biography into legend. I was a person, an actual, specific, historically situated person who was confused and frightened and driven by genuine questions about how to live and how to face the inevitable. And the answers I found, the teachings that have been transmitted under my name for 2.5 millennia, were found by that person, in that confusion and that fear, through the very human practices of attention, patience, and the willingness to sit with difficulty long enough to understand it rather than flee from it. And tonight, I want to speak to you as that person, not as a deity or a concept or an idealized figure, but as someone who discovered something genuinely useful about the nature of the mind, the nature of suffering, and the nature of rest. Let me begin with something that is perhaps the most important thing I ever understood. Something so simple that it sounds trivial until you have genuinely sat with it, until you have actually felt it in your own experience rather than merely grasping it intellectually. Suffering, and I use this word to mean not only pain, but the full range of human anguish, from the catastrophic to the everyday. Suffering is not caused primarily by the things that happen to us. It is caused primarily by our relationship to the things that happen to us. This is what I was pointing at in the first of what are called the 4 Noble Truths. The observation that dukkha, usually translated as suffering, is an unavoidable feature of conditioned existence. Conditioned existence simply means life as it is actually experienced, with its impermanence, its uncertainty, its refusal to stay exactly as you would like it to be. The things that cause suffering are not the events themselves. It is the grasping, the insistence that things be other than they are, that what is pleasant should be permanent, that what is painful should be absent, that the world should conform to our preferences rather than following its own nature. And I want to apply this directly to sleep, because sleep is one of the domains of life where this principle is most clearly and painfully visible.
The person who lies awake, suffering, is rarely suffering from the mere fact of being awake. They are suffering from their relationship to being awake, from the grasping after sleep, the insistence that sleep should be here right now, the escalating alarm at each moment that passes without sleep arriving. The wakefulness itself is neutral. It is the relationship to the wakefulness, the resistance, the judgment, the fear that transforms a simple physiological state into an experience of genuine suffering. And my first teaching to you tonight, the most direct and practical thing I can offer, is this. Whatever is happening right now, drop the relationship of resistance to it. Not the state itself, not the tiredness or the wakefulness, or the thoughts that are still present, but the layer of judgment and resistance that says this should not be happening, that this is wrong, that this is a problem. That layer, the layer of insistence that things be other than they are, is where the suffering lives. And releasing it does not require that things change. It only requires that you stop fighting the thing that is already here. I want to tell you now about the night I spent under the Bodhi tree, the night that is remembered as my enlightenment, because it contains something directly relevant to the experience of lying awake and struggling to find rest. I had been practicing severe asceticism for 6 years, starving myself, holding my breath, subjecting my body to various forms of deprivation, in the belief, common among the ascetics of my time, that liberation could be achieved through the subjugation of the body. It did not work. What it produced was not liberation, but extreme physical deterioration, and the discovery that a mind housed in a depleted body is not a mind capable of clear seeing. I remembered, in that state of near collapse, a moment from my childhood, a time when I had sat under a rose apple tree during a festival, watching the celebrations, and had spontaneously entered a state of deep stillness that was also full of warmth and clarity. That state had not been achieved through deprivation. It had arisen naturally from a mind that was rested and open. And I understood in that moment of remembering that I had been looking in the wrong direction, that liberation was not achieved by fighting the body, that clarity was not found through deprivation, that the middle way, the path between excessive indulgence and excessive renunciation, was not a compromise, but a discovery. That the mind and body must be genuinely cared for in order to be genuinely clear. I accepted food from a woman named Sujata. I bathed in the river. I sat under the Bodhi tree. And on that night, rested, nourished, genuinely cared for, I found what 6 years of deprivation had not produced. I tell you this because it contains a teaching about sleep and rest that is embedded in my own biography and that I consider essential. The cared-for body is the prerequisite for the clear mind. Not the suppressed body, not the deprived body, not the body that has been pushed past its limits in service of some achievement that the culture or the internal judge has decided is worth the cost. The body that is genuinely cared for, fed, rested, treated with the same compassion you would offer to someone you loved. This body houses the mind that can see clearly, decide wisely, act with genuine compassion rather than the pale imitation that exhaustion produces. Tonight, caring for your body means sleeping, genuinely, completely, without guilt, with the same intention of care that I had when I finally accepted Sujata's offering and recognized it not as defeat, but as wisdom. Let me speak to you now about a concept that is central to my teaching and that has been, I think, more misunderstood than almost anything else associated with my name. The concept of non-attachment. People hear non-attachment and often understand it as a kind of deliberate coldness, a withdrawal from caring, a deliberate distancing from the things and people of the world in order to avoid the suffering that loss creates. This is not what I meant. This is, in fact, almost exactly the opposite of what I meant. Non-attachment does not mean not caring. It means not clinging, not requiring things to be permanent in order to be genuinely enjoyed, not requiring outcomes to be controllable in order to be genuinely engaged with. The person who is genuinely non-attached can love more completely than the person who clings, because they are not loving through the filter of fear. They are not holding the beloved at a slight distance in order to be ready for the loss. They are not hedging their emotional investment. They are fully present with what is here now, fully in the love, fully in the joy, fully in the connection, without the background anxiety of the one who knows it will end and has never made peace with ending. And this applies directly, practically, tonight, to sleep. The person who clings to sleep, who needs sleep to arrive in a particular way, at a particular speed, with a particular quality, this person suffers more with sleep than the person who can be genuinely present with whatever experience the night brings. The non-attached relationship to sleep looks like this. Lying down with the genuine intention to rest, creating the conditions for sleep to arise, and then holding the process lightly, not requiring that sleep come immediately, not judging the quality of the night before it has finished, not bringing to the night the weight of every previous difficult night as evidence of how this one will go. Just this night, just this body, lying here, right now, just this breath, and then this one, and then this one, without clinging to the outcome, without resisting the present experience, just being here, completely, simply, without agenda, and allowing the night to do what nights do. I want to tell you something about the mind, about the nature of thought that I observed with great care and over many years, and that I think is among the most useful things I have to offer you tonight. The mind thinks. This is not a problem. This is not something to be fixed or suppressed or escaped. The mind thinks the way the body breathes, automatically, continuously, without requiring your permission or your conscious management. What I discovered under the Bodhi tree, through years of patient, careful observation, is that there is a difference between the mind that thinks and the awareness that observes the thinking. These are not the same thing, and the discovery of this difference changes everything. When you are lost in thought, when you are, as people say, caught up in your head, you are identified with the thoughts. You are the thoughts. The thought about tomorrow's challenge is not something you are observing. It is something you are. The thought about the thing you said yesterday that you wish you had said differently is not a story you are watching. It is a story you are living in real time with real emotional weight. But there is another possibility, one that I discovered and that I spent the rest of my life trying to communicate and transmit. The possibility of being the awareness rather than the content of the awareness. The thought arises. The awareness notices there is a thought. The thought has a quality: urgent, anxious, repetitive, whatever it is. The awareness notices this thought has this quality. The thought subsides or is replaced by another. The awareness notices the thought has changed. Throughout all of this, through the arising and the changing and the subsiding, the awareness remains. It is not disturbed by the thoughts. It is not carried away by them. It is not made anxious by the anxious thought, or made angry by the angry thought, or made restless by the restless thought. It simply notices, with a quality that I have sometimes called choiceless awareness, a witnessing that does not prefer, that does not judge, that does not try to change what it sees, but simply, completely sees it.
this awareness, this quality of witnessing, is not something you have to create. It is already there. It was there before you started thinking. It will be there after you stop. It is the ground on which all your thinking occurs. The silence between the words, the space between the thoughts, the stillness that is always present, but that is so often overlooked because the thoughts are so loud. Tonight, I am inviting you to rest in the awareness rather than in the thinking. Not to stop the thinking. You cannot stop it, and trying to stop it only adds another layer of agitation. But to notice, gently and without judgment, there is a thought, and to rest in the noticing rather than in the thought that is being noticed. Here is something about impermanence, the teaching that I return to more than almost any other, that I want to offer you now in the specific context of a difficult night. Anicca, the Pali word for impermanence, was one of the three characteristics that I identified as fundamental to all experience. Everything that arises passes. Everything that appears disappears. Nothing in the conditioned world remains exactly as it is for more than a moment. People usually encounter this teaching in the context of loss, as an explanation for why attachment causes suffering, as a reminder that the pleasant things in life will not always be here. And this is true, but it is only half the truth. The other half, the half that is often overlooked, is that impermanence also means that the difficult things pass. The pain is impermanent. The worry is impermanent. The sleeplessness is impermanent. The particular quality of difficulty that this night has, whatever that quality is impermanent. It will not be exactly like this tomorrow. It was not exactly like this yesterday. The experience is in motion, always changing, always shifting, never exactly the same from moment to moment. And this is genuinely comforting, not as a platitude, not as false reassurance, but as an accurate observation about the nature of experience. Whatever is difficult right now is already changing. Already in this moment, it is slightly different from what it was when you first noticed it. The instruction I offer, the practical, experiential instruction that follows from this understanding, is to let experience be in motion, rather than trying to freeze it. To allow the difficulty to change, rather than to catalogue it, to story it, to build a permanent residence inside it, from which you observe all subsequent moments. A difficult night is not evidence that all nights will be difficult. A restless hour is not evidence that the rest of the night will be restless. These are moments in motion, moments that are already becoming something slightly different, already moving toward what comes next, already impermanent in the most literal and useful sense of that word. I want to share with you now something about compassion, specifically about the application of compassion to yourself
because it is one of the teachings that people most often understand intellectually and least often practice personally. I taught extensively about metta, loving kindness, and about karuna, compassion. And the traditional metta practice begins with directing these qualities toward oneself before directing them outward toward others. Not because self-love is more important than love for others, but because it is the necessary foundation. You cannot give what you do not have. A well that has run dry cannot nourish the people who come to draw from it. The person who has never received genuine compassion, including from themselves, does not know what compassion actually is. They may perform it, they may go through the motions, but the quality of genuine, nourishing, genuinely healing compassion that transforms the one who receives it, this requires the giver to have actually felt it. And many people, more than I can count in my experience of human beings, extend to themselves a hardness that they would never extend to anyone they loved. They speak to themselves with a harshness that they would immediately recognize as unkind if they heard it directed at a child or a friend. They set for themselves standards of performance and perfection that they would consider unreasonable if applied to another. They withhold from themselves the rest and the care that they would unhesitatingly provide to someone in their family who was tired. I want to offer you tonight, as directly and as plainly as I can, the instruction to extend to yourself the same quality of care that you would give to someone you genuinely loved. Not as a vague aspiration, as a concrete, practical, tonight decision. If someone you loved were lying where you were lying, tired, perhaps struggling, perhaps carrying thoughts that will not release, what would you want for them? You would want them to rest. You would want them to let go of the day's accounting. You would want them to receive the night's restoration without the tax of guilt or self-criticism or the performance of productivity that the internal judge sometimes demands. You would want them to sleep genuinely, completely, with the same permission you give naturally to those you love. Give that to yourself tonight, not because you have earned it, because you need it, and because the practice of self-compassion, of genuine, practical, concrete care for your own well-being is the foundation of every other form of compassion you will practice tomorrow. Let me tell you now about something that is rarely discussed in connection with my teaching. something about the role of the body in the path toward clarity and peace. Because I think the misunderstanding of this has caused real and unnecessary suffering. As I described earlier, I began my spiritual search with asceticism, with the assumption, common in the traditions of my time, that the body was an obstacle to liberation, that pleasure was a snare, that the denial of physical needs was a form of spiritual discipline. And what I found through direct experience, through years of lived investigation, was that this was wrong. Not partially wrong, fundamentally wrong. The body is not an obstacle to clarity. The body is the vehicle through which clarity is experienced. The enlightenment I found under the Bodhi tree was not an experience of escaping the body. It was an experience of being more completely present in it, of attending to the moment of experience with such completeness and precision that the layers of interpretation and judgment and preference that usually separate us from direct experience fell away. And the body that was present for that experience was a body that had been cared for, a body that had been fed, a body that had rested from the exhaustion of 6 years of deprivation, a body that was, for the first time in years, being treated as something worth caring for, rather than something to be overcome. I developed in my teaching what I called the middle way, the path between sensual indulgence and harsh asceticism. And in practice, the middle way looks like basic, genuine care. Eating when hungry, resting when tired, sleeping when the body asks for sleep, attending to the physical needs with the same compassion and good sense that you would apply to any other aspect of life. Tonight, the middle way looks exactly like what you are doing. Not the indulgence of staying awake for entertainment when the body needs sleep. Not the harsh asceticism of refusing yourself rest because there is more to be done. But the genuine care, the recognition that this body tonight needs what the night offers, and the willingness to receive it. Here is something I want to share about the nature of the mind during sleep. Something that connects the ancient understanding of my tradition with what your own scientists have discovered in a way that I find deeply interesting. In my tradition, the dreaming state, what is called in Sanskrit the svapna state, is considered one of 4 states of consciousness, alongside the waking state, deep dreamless sleep, and a 4th state called turiya that underlies and pervades all the others. The dreaming state was understood to be a genuine mode of consciousness, not less real than waking, not a mere discharge of random impulses, but a particular way that awareness expresses itself when freed from the constraints of sensory input and the demands of the waking world. And the deep, dreamless sleep, the sushupti state, was regarded as a state of great peace and restoration, a temporary return of individual awareness to something closer to its own source. Not unconsciousness in the sense of nothing happening, but a different mode of happening, quieter and deeper and more completely still than anything available in waking. Your neuroscientists now describe slow wave sleep, the deepest phase of non-REM sleep, as the phase of greatest physical restoration, the phase when growth hormone is released, when the immune system is most active, when the glymphatic system clears the metabolic waste from the brain's tissue. Two entirely different traditions of understanding, one ancient, one contemporary, arriving at the same recognition that the deepest sleep is the most important sleep, that the stillest phase of the night is the most generative phase, that the place where nothing seems to be happening is the place where the most essential things are happening. And both traditions also agree on this. You cannot reach this depth by forcing. You cannot descend into deep sleep through effort. You arrive there by releasing, by letting go of waking consciousness gradually, by allowing the awareness to relax its grip on the external world and settle into something quieter. This is the art of falling asleep, and it is genuinely an art. The art of releasing what the waking mind holds in a way that is gradual, willing, without resistance. Not throwing it down, not dragging it along, but releasing. The way a hand releases something it no longer needs to hold. Open, gradual, complete. I want to speak to you now about something that I consider one of the most practically useful aspects of my teaching. Something that has genuine, immediate application to the challenge of settling the mind for sleep. I taught a practice called Satipatthana, usually translated as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first foundation is mindfulness of the body, and the instruction is precise and specific. Attend to the body as it is, not as you think it is or wish it were, but as it is actually presenting itself in this moment. The sensations, the weight, the temperature, the places of contact between the body and the surface it rests on, the movement of breath in the belly and the chest, the subtle pulse of the heartbeat that you can feel if you attend carefully enough. Not interpreting these sensations, not judging them, not deciding whether they are good or bad, comfortable or uncomfortable. Simply noticing them with the same quality of neutral, patient attention that a scientist brings to observation. This practice, this simple, direct, sustained attention to the body, has a quality that nothing else quite replicates. It grounds the mind in the present moment, not in the past, where regret lives, not in the future,
where worry lives, but here, in this body, in this moment, in the actual, present, physical experience of lying in warmth and quiet and being a biological organism at rest. The mind that is attending to the body cannot simultaneously be lost in thought. Not completely. The thoughts arise, of course they arise, but they arise in the foreground of an awareness that is anchored in physical sensation, and they tend to pass more quickly, to carry less weight, to exercise less pull on the attention that is already occupied with something real and present. I'm inviting you to practice this now, not as a formal meditation, not with the intention of achieving any particular state, but simply as the natural direction of attention toward what is here. The physical reality of this moment, this body, this breath, this warmth, this surface beneath you that holds your weight without effort, without complaint, with complete and silent reliability. What do you feel right now where your body meets the surface beneath it? Just notice, without judgment, without deciding what it means. Just the actual, present, physical sensation of being held. Let me offer you now something about relationships, about the people in your life, that I think is worth carrying into sleep not as a worry, but as a comfort. I taught about the interdependence of all things, what I called pratitya samutpada, dependent origination, the understanding that nothing exists in isolation, that every experience arises in dependence on conditions that themselves arise in dependence on other conditions, in a web of mutual arising that has no absolute beginning and no absolute end. In the context of relationships, this means something quite beautiful and quite humbling. You are not separate from the people in your life. Not in the way that the culture of individualism sometimes suggests. You have been shaped by them, by the love and the difficulty, by the conversations that changed something, by the presence of people who saw you in ways you could not see yourself. And they have been shaped by you in ways you may never fully know, in ways that ripple forward into their lives and into the lives they touch. This interdependence is not a burden. It is one of the most genuine sources of meaning that human life offers. The connections are real. The influence is real. The love, whatever form it takes, is woven into the fabric of reality in a way that does not end with the ending of any particular moment or relationship. And tonight, resting in this understanding, not grasping it, not analyzing it, but simply letting it be present in the way that a warm room is present without needing to be examined. You can release the worry about relationships without abandoning the care. The relationships continue, the connections endure, the love does its work in the world, whether you are awake to manage it or not. And the most generous thing you can do for the people in your life tonight is to sleep,
so that tomorrow you can be the version of yourself that they deserve to encounter. Rested, present, genuinely available. Here is something about what I sometimes called the poison of the mind. Something I return to repeatedly in my teaching because I found it to be among the most universal sources of suffering. I identified 3 primary sources of suffering, 3 mental states that, when they dominate the mind, reliably produce pain and difficulty regardless of circumstances. I called them the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. And I want to translate these into the language of the ordinary mind at bedtime, because they show up in the bedroom with remarkable consistency. Greed at bedtime does not look like wanting things. It looks like wanting sleep, intensely, urgently, demandingly, in a way that prevents the very thing it wants. It looks like clinging to the hope of rest so tightly that rest cannot arrive. Hatred at bedtime does not look like hostility. It looks like resistance, the aversion to the wakefulness that is here, the rejection of the thoughts that are present, the pushing away of the experience of this moment because it is not the experience that was wanted. Delusion at bedtime looks like belief, the belief that the thoughts circling at midnight are accurate assessments of reality, that the size the problems appear to be at 2 in the morning is the size they actually are, that the catastrophizing mind is reporting facts rather than generating projections colored by exhaustion and the particular quality of night. The antidotes I taught to these 3 poisons were generosity, loving-kindness, and wisdom. And translated into the bedtime context, generosity means releasing, giving the night what it is asking for without the grasping of greed. Loving-kindness means allowing, meeting the experience of this moment with the same warmth you would extend to a friend, without the rejection of hatred. And wisdom means remembering that the mind at night is not a reliable narrator, that the thoughts will look different in the morning, that the problems are not the size they appear when exhaustion amplifies everything it touches. There is one more teaching I want to offer you tonight, something that came to me in the years after the Enlightenment, in the decades of teaching and traveling and conversation that constituted the rest of my life. I discovered in those years of teaching something that surprised me, something that I had not fully anticipated when I set out to share what I had found. The teaching that was most useful was almost never the most complex teaching. People came to me with elaborate questions about the nature of consciousness, about whether the self was real or illusory, about what happened after death, about the structure of the cosmos. And I often declined to answer these questions, not because I lacked opinions, but because I had learned that these questions, however interesting, were not what people actually needed. What people actually needed was much simpler. They needed to stop causing themselves unnecessary suffering. They needed to pay attention to what was actually happening. They needed to treat themselves and others with genuine compassion. They needed to rest. I compared the elaborate philosophical questions to arrows. If you are shot with an arrow, you do not spend time investigating who made the arrow, what kind of wood the shaft is made from, what philosophy motivated the archer. You remove the arrow. You attend to the wound. You do what is immediately necessary to relieve the suffering that is immediately present. Tonight, the arrow is sleeplessness. The wound is exhaustion. And the instruction, the simple, direct, unsophisticated instruction, is not to investigate the philosophical dimensions of the sleep problem, not to analyze the history of difficult nights, not to develop theories about why rest is elusive, but to do the simple thing: release what can be released. Rest what needs to rest. Allow what is already available to arrive. The sophistication of the question does not improve the quality of the rest. The simplicity of the practice, lying still, releasing thought, allowing the awareness to relax, is what produces the rest. And the rest produces everything else. I have been speaking for a long time now, and as the words have continued, something in you has been changing. Not because of the words, not because of their content or their wisdom or their elegance, but because the time has been passing, and the body has been doing what the body does when it is given the signal that the day is over. Your core temperature has been dropping. Your melatonin levels have been rising. The neural circuits associated with alertness have been growing quieter, and the circuits associated with rest, with the deep, slow, restorative rhythms of sleep, have been becoming gradually more dominant. This is not something I did. This is something your body has been doing, quietly, reliably, without your management, throughout the entire time we have been together. The teaching I have been offering was never really about the content of the words. It was about the quality of the time, about giving your body and your mind the quiet, unhurried, genuinely present company that allows the natural process of sleep to proceed without interference. And now the process is nearly complete. The thoughts have become less insistent. The breath has become slower. The weight of the body against the surface beneath it has become more complete, less held, less managed, more simply and trustingly present. I sat under the Bodhi tree until the morning star rose. And in the time between sitting and the star's appearance, something that had been gradually released completely. You do not need to wait for the morning star. You do not need to sit until dawn. The releasing that I found after years of practice, you are practicing it right now, in this bed, in this quiet, in the simple and profound act of lying still and allowing the night to do what the night was made to do. Rest is not distant from where you are. It is not something you have yet to arrive at. It is the natural state, the ground beneath the activity, the quiet beneath the noise, the stillness beneath the movement, that has been here all along, waiting for the movement to settle. Settle now, not into nothing, into what was always here, the warm, quiet, held, completely ordinary miracle of a body at rest in a world that continues without requiring your attention tonight. I am here, not in the way that requires anything of you, in the way that good company is here, simply present, simply available, asking nothing, offering only the warmth of genuine attention and the silence that comes after everything important has been said. Sleep now, not because you have earned it, not because you have achieved the right level of relaxation, but because your body is ready, because the night is generous, because tomorrow needs what only tonight can give. Fall asleep with the feeling that the mind has been genuinely quieted tonight, that the body is already receiving the deep restoration it has been asking for, and that tomorrow you will wake with the particular clarity that comes to those who have rested, not just physically, but in the deepest layers of the self.
Thank you.